Good afternoon, participants. Hello, am I audible? Good afternoon, all participants.
Good afternoon, sir.
We wait for 2 minutes more so that some other faculty, some other participants may join. We wait for 2 minutes more, then we start the session. So we start now. I am Kuldeep Patel, working as an assistant professor in Automobile Engineering Department, A.D. Patel Institute of Technology. So since last 2 days, we have been learning of various aspects on our HTTP topic. So I can say slowly we are moving to touch the all aspects of our HTTP topic from the various teachers, various eminent speakers from the industry and institutes. Today, one more speaker, expert speaker with us, Dr. Milind S. Yadav, who is working as an associate professor in Finolex Academy of Management and Technology, Ratnagiri. He will be going to deliver the points on VCR, Variable Compression Ratio Engine Optimization Techniques. So for more introduction, I would like to call Professor Simit Prajapati from Automobile Engineering Department. Professor Simit?
Yes, Kuldeep, thank you.
Okay, okay.
Okay, so it's my honor to introduce our today's eminent speaker, Dr. Milind Sasikant Yadav, sir. He has completed his PhD degree in mechanical engineering and MTech in mechanical engineering with specialization in automobile engineering. His research area is engine and emission. He has very rich experience of 20 years in the teaching. He has published more than 30 papers in international and national peer-reviewed journals and conference. He is also reviewer for International Journal of Hydrogen Energy. It's a science direct journal. He is also author of the book titled on novel variable compression ratio engine. He has received also research grant from University of Mumbai and research project from Konkan Railway. He has guided 6 PG projects and two are undergoing. So without wasting much time, I request Mr. Milind Yadav sir to start his session. Sir, please.
Thank you. I hope I am audible.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. So it's a very good afternoon to all the participants of this particular STTP. Uh, I mean, before starting, before sharing the screen, let me introduce myself once again. I mean, there is little bit of introduction. Myself, Dr. Milind Yadav. I'm basically working as associate professor in Department of Mechanical Engineering, Phenolics Academy of Management and Technology, which is there in Maharashtra state. Very soon I'll be sharing my contact details as well. And today I'll be talking on the topic variable compression ratio engine and the optimization. Well, I completed my master's from Veer Mata Jizabai Technological Institute, VZTI. It's a prominent institute in Maharashtra basically and in India. And there basically while doing my MTech work, basically I came across this particular topic of variable compression ratio engine. In the initial phases, I found out a lot of literature. Then I proposed my own variable compression ratio engine. I fabricated that, and then I continued the research on variable compression ratio engine, and I took it all the way to my PhD level. I mean, almost 3 4 years back, I have been awarded my PhD, and since then I am constantly working on this particular topic. First of all, I would like to thank you, the organizers of this particular STTP, for inviting me as a resource person for this particular session. Now, what I'll be doing basically, I'll be sharing my screen. So, since I do not want to consume a lot of bandwidth, what I'll be doing, I have already logged in to this meeting through two different devices. Through one device, I'll try to communicate my audio, and through one more device, I'll try to present the screen. So just to, I mean, just to avoid the consumption of a lot of bandwidth, I'm just switching off my camera, and through this device itself, I'll be presenting the audio. Now, let me share my screen. Let me share my screen. Just give me some time.
Okay, okay, sir. Take your time.
If at any point of time you feel there is a disturbance or something like that, then please let me know immediately, sir. That's my humble request, because like I said at the beginning of this session itself, I mean, we are experiencing a lot of thunderstorms over here. So there is, I mean, I pray to God that there will not be any disconnection as far as internet is concerned. I hope everything.
Nothing will happen, sir.
Yes, yes, yes. So there we go. I'm just presenting the screen.
We hope for best.
Yeah, obviously. And there we go. I'm just trying to present the screen. Can you see the screen, sir?
No, 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 sir. No, sir.
You can't. Just a minute. Let me present it once again. Okay, can you see this?
Yeah, it's visible. Visible. Your screen is visible.
Okay, great, great.
Presentation as well.
Okay, sir, everything is fine now?
Fine, fine, sir. Your presentation visible now.
Yes, sir. Thank you. So without wasting time,
Yeah.
let me begin the presentation. Like I said already, I'll be talking on variable compression ratio engine and how the variable compression ratio engines are used typically for optimization of engine operating parameters that I'm going to discuss in this particular presentation. So here are some contents of the presentation. In the early part of my presentation, I'll be discussing about variable compression ratio engine. So if you look at, I mean, seven or eight odd points right over here. Initially, I'll be introducing the concept of variable compression ratio engine. Then I'll be talking about what are the different methods typically used for compression ratio variation. Then I'll be talking about the practical applications of VCR engine. There are a lot of automotive manufacturers who have designed and developed variable compression ratio engines. Then I'll be discussing about some facts about VCR technology. So it's like what are the advantages and what are the disadvantages of this technology. And if somebody wanted to design his own variable compression ratio engine, then what are the things that he needs to take care of, that too I'll discuss. Then I'll talk about my own work, the proposed novel variable compression ratio engine. uh, then in somewhere in between, right over here rather, I'll introduce you to oxyhydrogen gas. I mean, about this particular gas I'll be talking later, but I did experimentation on this particular gas during my during my PhD work rather. So that I'll talk a little bit. I'm in need of this one just to explain the remaining parts. These parts which I'll be explaining, which are related to optimization. And in this particular case, I'll be typically talking about response surface methodology for optimization. What are the steps involved in response surface methodology optimization? What are the different designs typically used? The desirability approach used for optimization. Then I'll be talking about composite desirability. I'll be talking about modeling using regression analysis. It is the most important step. Then I'll also share some details about how to check the model adequacy. Then I'll talk a little about generation of 3D surface plot, then response optimizer plot, and finally I'll be also talking about the confirmation experiment. So all in all, you will find this particular session is basically divided into two parts, right? Up to this particular point, I'll be talking about VCR engines, and then later on, I'll be talking about optimization and how I have done optimization, that I'll be talking in detail, obviously. So without wasting time, let's begin. Uh, First one and most important one is obviously introduction to variable compression ratio engine. Now, in this one, this VCR, the word VCR stands for variable compression ratio. So in this one, obviously, the word compression ratio comes into picture. So I thought I'll try to define compression ratio first. Now, right over here, you will find schematic representation for engine is shown right over here. Now, I mean, inside the cylinder, most probably every one of us knows that there are two positions of the piston. Piston normally reciprocates inside the combustion chamber, and then it will be having a topmost position inside the combustion chamber, and he'll be having the bottommost position inside the combustion chamber. The topmost position we call it as obviously TDC, and the bottommost position we call it as obviously BDC. Now, once the piston reaches to its top dead center position, still you will find some space is left right at the top of the piston crown, something like this. This one. This is the space where actually fuel is burned inside the combustion chamber, and then after burning, obviously you will have product of combustion, and those product of combustion do work onto the piston, and then they will be obviously forcing the piston in the downward direction, and then it is going to give you a rotation at the crankshaft. I mean, we all know that, right? So yeah, I just wanted to revise the things because this is extremely important. Now, if I try to define the compression ratio, it's obviously the swept volume upon the clearance volume. That is what we define. Swept volume is volume swept by the piston while moving from top dead center to bottom dead center position, and clearance volume is obviously the volume which is reserved for the fuel consumption right at the top of the piston crown. So that is what we exactly mean by the compression ratio is. Now, every one of us knows that engine brake power, we typically call it as BP, obviously. Engine brake power mostly depends upon number of factors. Now, if you look at the formula for brake power, it is typically written as 2 pi NT divided by 60. That is how we write it as, right? Now, if you look at the brake power, well, this particular brake power depend upon number of factors, and out of which the most important factor is obviously the compression ratio. Now, there is an automobile trend that everybody wish to have an engine with infinite power density, right? I mean, the researchers or the automotive sector or the design engineers, especially who are working in this automotive sector and especially related with engine, their sole purpose is you'll find there are two purposes. The first and the most important one is obviously increasing the brake power of the engine every and the second one is obviously increasing the fuel economy. The second one is obviously increasing the fuel economy. We Indians are obsessed with this one. Obviously, we always wanted to have maximum fuel economy. I hope you remember that advertise of Maruti Suzuki. They always call it as "kitna deti hai," something like that, right? These are the two main objectives while designing any engine. It's a brake power that has to be as maximum as possible, and it should give maximum fuel economy. Now, like I said, as far as this brake power is concerned, there are three typical methods. There are three typical methods which are used to increase the power output from any engine. The first one is increasing engine RPM. The second one is turbocharging, and the third one is increasing the compression ratio. Now, as far as increasing the RPM of engine is concerned, if I think of this one, then it's but natural. If you look at this particular formula, BP is equal to 2 pi NT by 60. Obviously, that N stands for the engine RPM. So it's but natural by increasing the RPM of the engine, it is possible for you to increase the power output. The second method is turbocharging. Turbocharging is basically a type of supercharging where the compressor is basically driven with the help of exhaust gases. And the job of the compressor is to compress the air, and it has to be air or the fuel charge rather, and it has to force it inside the combustion chamber. So we know that with the help of turbocharging or supercharging, even it is possible for us to increase the peak pressure inside the combustion chamber, and with the help of which it is possible for us to increase the power output. And the third one is obviously by increasing the compression ratio. So with this three methods, it is possible for us to increase the power output. Now, as I've mentioned right over here at the bottom, all these three methods bring them with a host of problems. Now, I won't be talking about this problem related to this one initially. That I'll be talking little later. But initially, let me talk about what are the problems related with increasing engine RPM. Now, we know that obviously by increasing engine RPM, the power output will increase. But as engines start running at elevated RPM, it is typically observed that puts more dynamic load on the engine. That put more dynamic load on the engine. And with increase in dynamic load, it is typically observed that the friction between the different engine parts also significantly increases, right? And we all know as the friction increases, obviously the wear and tear increases and overall life of the engine drops down. So probably this will not be the ideal solution just to increase the compression ratio. Together with that, we also know that with increase in engine RPM, the pumping losses also increases. Now, as far as pumping losses are concerned, well, I hope you know at the end of the expansion stroke, when the piston moves in upward direction, the exhaust valve normally opens and the product of combustion will be thrown out of the combustion chamber. Now, engine has to do some work. This piston has to do some work to throw the product of combustion outside the combustion chamber, right? And that work is typically reckoned as obviously the pumping losses. As the speed of the engine increases, hardly any time is available for the piston to throw the product of combustion outside the combustion chamber. So with increasing speed, obviously the pumping losses also increases. So there are basically two problems associated with this method. The first one is it increases the dynamic load on the engine, because of which the wear and tear increases, and that significantly drops down the life of the engine. And the second one is by increasing the engine RPM, the pumping losses also increases, and then it is a waste of the engine power. So this is probably not the correct solution to boost up the power output from the engine. Let's talk about the second one. It's the turbocharging. Now, like I said, turbo, in case of turbocharging, we basically increase the charge density inside the combustion chamber. For a naturally aspirated engine, and if you think of a supercharged or a turbocharged engine, you will find there is a lot of difference between the charge density, which we typically show by later rho, right? Now, I hope you know that most of the time, if you try to define the volumetric efficiency for a supercharged engine, most of the time you'll find this comes beyond 100%. This comes beyond 100%. The reason for that is the volume of charge inducted inside is much more than the swept volume of the engine. So if you define the volumetric efficiency, it goes beyond 100%. Now, in this particular case, since you are increasing the charge density, the peak pressure inside the combustion chamber, that also significantly increases. On one side, it will help the piston to force in the downward direction, and that will increase the power output from the engine, no doubt about that. But on the other side, you will notice the peak combustion chamber temperature is also putting thermal loads on the engine, because the temperature of the engine significantly increases in case of turbocharging, and that put lot of thermal loads on the engine. Now, to withstand those thermal loads, you will have to be very careful while designing the engine. So most of the time, I hope everyone of us knows that they have started using alloys in case of piston, or alloys in case of cylinder materials, right? That is basically to take care of the thermal loads on the engine. So once again, same situation at elevated temperature. In case of turbocharging, there is a lot of problem as far as knocking is concerned. I hope you guys know about this particular word, knocking. Knocking is, I mean, you are knocking mostly takes place at the end of the combustion chamber in case of SI engine, and it mostly takes early in the combustion process in case of CI engine. And because of knocking, basically sudden rise in temperature is not temperature, rather pressure inside the combustion chamber is observed, and then it creates a typical ringing noise, and that typically called as obviously knocking. So once again, same situation, turbocharging, even though it is very popular nowadays, especially in case of diesel engines, this method is becoming very popular nowadays. Still, there is a problem related to this one if you wish to increase the power output of an engine. Now, the third one and the most important one is the compression ratio, right? The one which I'll be talking today in detail, that is this particular term. Now, we know by increasing the compression ratio, it is possible for us to increase the peak pressure inside the combustion chamber. We know that, right? The product of combustion will be doing a lot of work onto the piston, and because of which it is possible for us to increase the power output from the engine. Naturally, we know that. But on the other side rather, you will notice that if you try to keep compression ratio higher, then once again the temperature of the combustion chamber will be significantly on a larger side, on a higher side. and with increase in combustion chamber temperature, the knocking tendency of the engine significantly increases. I hope everyone of us knows that with significant increase in the combustion chamber temperature, there is great possibility of engine to go for knocking. Now, obviously, if you wish to reduce the chances of knocking, then you'll have to reduce the compression ratio. Now, if you look at the situation right over here, it is this factor, compression ratio, that you will be constantly changing in case of these types of engines. Now, what they basically do when the engine is running in idling, when the engine is running, especially in idling or part load, you will try to extract a lot of power. And in that particular case, you are going to increase the compression ratio. By increasing the compression ratio, it is possible for you to extract a lot of power from the engine naturally. And then there are different problems which are associated with idling that I'll be talking later. Those also vanishes out if you are going to increase the compression ratio. Once you move from idling to part load operation, or from part load, once you switch over to full load operation, progressively you will notice the temperature of the combustion chamber will increase. And as the temperature of the combustion chamber increases, there are chances of occurrence of detonation or knocking. Now, in that particular case, especially when the engine will be running at full load operation, the temperature of the combustion chamber will be higher, and to avoid chances of occurrence of knocking, you will be lowering down the compression ratio. Most of the time it is typically seen the compression ratio, if you look at current two-wheelers or four-wheelers, you will find the compression ratio will be close to 10:1. Now, in case of variable compression ratio engine, under idling condition, the compression ratio will be close to 16:1. And at full load condition, when at the full load condition, to avoid the chances of detonation and knocking, most of the time the compression ratio will be also dropped down. So this is basically the concept of variable compression ratio engine. The engine where it is possible for you to change the ratio in real time without stopping the engine and its operation, obviously. So this is just a brief introduction to the variable compression ratio engine. Now, literature shows there are a lot of methods available with the help of which it is possible for you to change the compression ratio. Like, as I hope you know how I've defined compression ratio. Compression ratio is obviously the total volume upon the clearance volume, and the total volume we normally represent as swept volume plus clearance volume upon clearance volume. This is how we basically define the compression ratio. So it comes at 1 plus Vs upon Vc. I hope every one of us knows this one. Now, if at all you wish to change the compression ratio, either you'll have to change the total volume, and you have to change the clearance volume. In case of total volume, you can change the swept volume, or you can change the clearance volume. So either you'll have to change the clearance volume, or you'll have to change the swept volume. So if it is possible for you to do that, then you will find it is possible for you to change the compression ratio. Let's talk about the first method, which is mentioned in the literature, and the first method is articulated cylinder head. The first method is articulated cylinder head. Now, if you look at this particular mechanism right over here, well, obviously this one, what you see over here, this one is basically the cylinder head. Right over here, this one, what you'll find, it's the piston, and other parts, this is the connecting rod, this one is the crank, this one is the crankshaft, right? Now, if you look at the cylinder block, right, then in that particular case, you will find the cylinder block along with the cylinder head is articulated, or it is rather pivoted at a certain point right over here. Now, there is a mechanism with the help of which it is possible for you to swivel the cylinder head, something like this. Now, for the fixed position of the piston, if I try to swivel the cylinder head or the cylinder block, then naturally I'll be changing the top dead center and bottom dead center positions of the piston inside the cylinder. And in that particular case, obviously, I'll be changing the clearance volume and the swept volume as well. And with the help of which it is possible for me to change the compression ratio. When I'll be swinging something like this, obviously this particular volume, the clearance volume, I'll be dropping down. And in that particular case, by dropping down the clearance volume, I'll be increasing the compression ratio. And if I'll be swiveling something like this in anti-clockwise direction, then naturally I'll be increasing the clearance volume. And by increasing the clearance volume, I'll be dropping down the compression ratio. So that's the first method, and the name is articulated cylinder head. The second one is hydraulic piston. Hydraulic piston is the method where the modification of the piston crown is carried out. Basically, there is hydraulic mechanism with the help of which it is possible for me to either lift up or lower down the piston crown right over here. Now, I am not in a position to show you how actually this is happening. The reason for that will be falling short of time. So this is just a schematic representation. Don't get confused, but there, with the help of hydraulic mechanism, it is possible for me to lift up or lower down the cylinder head. Once I do that, obviously I'll be changing the clearance volume of the engine, and once I change the clearance volume, obviously I'll be changing the compression ratio. So that's the second method, and it is hydraulic piston. The third one is eccentrics at bearing. Now look at this particular representation. Right over here, you will find this red color right over here. These are basically eccentrics. I hope you know the word eccentrics. Eccentrics are the one which, when turn about its own center of rotation, they keep on changing the distance from the center of rotation. It's something like a cam. It's something like cam, right? As the cam rotates, the radius of rotation constantly changes, rather, and because of which it is possible for us to displace the follower. uh, I hope you know that, right? So similar type of eccentrics are loaded either at the gudgeon pin, or at right at this particular point at the big end of the connecting rod, or even in some case you will notice that these kinds of eccentrics are loaded even at the crankshaft bearing. I'll be giving you some practical examples for this one. Now, what you'll have to do, basically, by certain mechanism, you'll have to turn these eccentrics. And once you turn these eccentrics about its own center of rotation, then naturally they will be altering the combustion chamber geometry. Like in this particular case, this will lift up or lower down the piston ultimately. So you will be changing the compression ratio. In this particular case, it will be changing the length of the connecting rod, and in this particular case, it will be literally changing the length of the crankshaft. Ultimately, you will be changing the compression ratio. So that's the third method, which is eccentrics at the bearing. The fourth one, it is a multi-link crank mechanism. Now, in this particular case, most of the time, the modification in the connecting rod is carried out. Now, you look at this one. This is the piston right over here. This is the crank right over here. And in between, right over here, something right over here, you will notice the typical shape of the connecting rod is changed. And then it basically makes use of a multi-link mechanism. Even in this particular case, in the second representation, you will notice that this connecting rod is not of single link. It is made up of number of links. And once you change the position of this particular links, especially where the links are pivoted right over here or right over here or even right over here, you will find it is possible for you to change the length of the connecting rod. And then once again, it is possible for you to change the positions of the piston inside the combustion chamber. And once again, you can change the compression ratio. So that's the fourth one. Fifth one is piston inside the cylinder head. Well, basically, I worked on this particular methodology, which I'll be talking little later. So here you will find the cylinder head is modified, and inside the cylinder, a piston is loaded, a small piston, and it is possible for you to reciprocate this particular piston. either with the help of cam or maybe with the help of hydraulic actuation, whatever it may be. And then it is possible for you to change this clearance volume. And by changing the clearance volume, once again, you'll be changing the compression ratio. So if this piston is advancing inside the combustion chamber, something like this in this particular direction, then clearance volume is going to change, and that is going to increase the compression ratio. If it is advancing something like this, then it will be increasing the clearance volume, and it will be decreasing the compression ratio. That's the fourth one. Sorry, that's the fifth one. It's piston in cylinder head. And the last one is gear based mechanism. This one I'll be showing you a small video based on this one. It basically makes use of a gear mechanism right over here, and in real time, by actuation of this particular mechanism, it is literally possible for you to lower down this piston and the connecting rod right over here. So once it starts moving down, same situation, the clearance volume will increase, compression ratio will drop down. So these are all in all six different mechanisms, like articulated cylinder head, hydraulic piston, then eccentric set bearing, multi-link mechanism, piston in cylinder head, and gear based mechanism. With these are the six mechanisms with the help of which typically you will find the compression ratio is changed. Now let's move on to the next one. I'll be giving you some practical examples of VCR engine now. So here is the first one on your screen, and that is Saab's VCR engine. Saab is the name of the company who is basically put forward this concept, and this has been used since long rather. Now in this particular engine you will notice it is basically falling into the first category, where you will find the cylinder head is pivoted at certain point. You look at this one. Well, the cylinder head is basically pivoted at this point, and then there is a lever mechanism like right over here, and simply by using hand operated lever, it is possible for you to turn this particular cylinder head or swivel, right? So this one, with the help of which you will be obviously changing the compression ratio. So this was patented by Saab, the name of the automobile manufacturer. The second one is MCE5 VCR engine. Well, this is a multi-link kind of a mechanism which is put forward by MCE. It is, I mean, if you look at this particular engine, this is pivoted at this particular point. I hope you can see that. So it's basically making use of a different links below the piston, right over here, and you will notice that it is basically changing the position of the piston right over here, something like this. And then it's possible for you to change the compression ratio. Then on the bottom left side you will find the Patacon's VCR engine, where a cam mechanism is loaded right at the cylinder head. A cam mechanism is loaded right at the cylinder head. So please look at this one right at this particular point. Right at this particular point here, you will find the cam mechanism is loaded right over there, and by turning that particular cam, it is possible for you to literally lift up the cylinder head, and by lifting the cylinder head, it is possible for you to change the compression ratio. This one is FEV's VCR engine. This is falling into the category of eccentrics at the crankshaft bearing. Look at this one. So these were the eccentrics that I'm talking about, and you will find there are extensions right over here for the eccentrics, and there are counter gears which are loaded onto the counter shaft. So this one is the counter shaft, and there are counter gears loaded on the counter shaft, and on the extension of the eccentrics, eccentric gears are loaded right over here. So with the help of some actuators, you have to turn this particular counter shaft. Once you turn this counter shaft, it is possible for you to rotate this particular eccentrics about its own center of rotation. So by that, it is possible for you to change the radius, and then this entire piston and connecting rod assembly will either get lifted up or it will get lower down. So that's the next one. FEV is VCR. And the last one in the list, which is from the Volvo. Now, Volvo has designed the mechanism where you will find the cylinder head is modified. So this one is the cylinder head, and the cylinder his head is basically modified. And inside the cylinder head, they have added one small piston right over here. Now, this is the actuation mechanism for that piston. Once you turn this one on, it is possible for you to change the compression ratio. So these are typical practical examples of variable compression ratio engines which are designed and developed by the automotive manufacturers. Now let's move on. Let me tell you some facts about the VCR technology now. The first and the most important one is overall size and vehicle integration. Now, as far as present automobile industry is concerned, there is a trend which is moving all over automobile industry nowadays, and the trend is of engine downsizing. The trend is of engine downsizing. Now, as far as downsizing is concerned, downsizing is concept where you try to reduce the size of the engine. You try to reduce the size of the engine, and you have to keep its power output as it is. So reducing the size of engine by keeping its power output the same is typically called as engine downsizing. Now you look at some of the practical example. Let me share some of the practical examples. You must have heard about Maruti Suzuki Baleno. You must have heard about Fiat Punto. Maybe it's old. I mean, not old. Rather, it's not in manufacturing now. Fiat has stopped its production, but however, it was there. So you must have heard about Fiat Punto, or you must have heard about Indica Vista. Well, the product of Tata, obviously, Indica Vista. Basically, all these three make use of the same engine. I mean, Maruti, instead of Baleno, let me call it as Swift rather. Instead of Baleno, let me call it as Swift. On Swift, they call this particular engine as VDI. On Fiat, they call this particular engine as multi-jet, and here they basically call it as quadrajet. Basically, the engine is one and the same. There is no change in the engine, but look at the manufacturers. The same engine will be used by three different manufacturers. This is basically Fiat sourced engine. So this is a typical trend of in automotive industry. Even if you look at the recent launches from Kia Seltos or from Hyundai Creta or Verna, you will find both shares the same engine. Even if you think of two-wheelers, then Bajaj Dominar or KTM Duke, all these making use of the same engine. Now, that's what I said. It's a trend in the automotive sector to use the same engine across a number of vehicles. Now, once you downsize the engine, obviously, that it gives you a biggest advantage. And the biggest advantage that it gives you is obviously the space beside the engine is typically used for peripherals, different peripherals. Like you will be loading air conditioner, you will be loading power steering, or there are a number of accessories, right, which are all the time loaded besides the engine in the engine compartment. Now, once you reduce the size of the engine by keeping its power output same, it is possible for you to have lot many peripherals inside the engine compartment. So the space will be enough if you downsize the engine. So that's what I said. The downsizing is the latest trend. Now, in case of variable compression ratio engine, we know that the power density or the power output is significantly high, because you will be literally controlling the compression ratio depending upon your requirement. You are going to drive that particular engine. So even though the power density is high for VCR engine, you must have noticed VCR engines are observed to be complex in their construction. I mean, if you look at the different mechanisms which I showed to you, you will notice that engines are typically complex in their construction, and because of their complexity, there creates a problem as far as integration of VCR engines with the current automobiles. Now, if you wish to integrate the VCR engines in current automobile, then the architecture of VCR engine must be as conventional as possible. So you cannot have a entirely new engine. I mean, new engine is obviously a new engine with different sizes, different shapes. Then according to that shape and size, you will have to design the automobiles, and that is obviously a costly affair. So whenever you think of designing your own variable compression ratio engine, please take care of the integration possibility of that particular engine. Otherwise, there will be lot of problem as far as the vehicle integration is concerned. So that's the first fact about the VCR engine. Now the second one is knock limit. Now, in case of FCR engine, in case of fixed compression ratio engine, what we typically do, especially when the engine is running at very high power output, when the temperature of the combustion chamber is very high, in that particular case, to avoid the knocking tendency of the engine, the air fuel mixture, or sometimes literally fuel, will be injected inside the combustion chamber. Literally fuel will be injected inside the combustion chamber. Now, what is the advantage going for this one? Well, once you inject the fuel inside the combustion chamber, immediately the temperature of the combustion chamber drops down. And as the temperature of the combustion chamber drops down, obviously knock intensity significantly comes down, and it is possible for you to have a control over the knock. But as you will be literally injecting the fuel inside the combustion chamber, that significantly increases HC and CO emissions. That significantly increases HC and CO emissions. So as far as HC and CO emissions are concerned, these are once again deadly dangerous. This is obviously unburned hydrocarbon, and this is obviously carbon monoxide. We expect it to get converted into carbon dioxide, but as you inject the fuel inside the combustion chamber, HC, which is unburned hydrocarbon, significantly increases. So this technology is typically used in case of fixed compression ratio engine. So it is not at all advisable actually, because during that period of time, HC and CO percentage significantly increases. In case of VCR engines, you are having control over the compression ratio itself. So as the knock sensors determines that there is possibility of knocking, then you can literally reduce the compression ratio. Hence, these VCR engines are typically called as knock proof or knockless engines. The one which are not going to go for knocking at all. The next one is the thermal resistance limit. At a high compression ratio, most of the time, like I said, in case of VCR engine, you will be typically using higher compression ratios. So out of, you know that whatever heat that we supply to the engine, that part of that heat will get converted into work done, and part of that heat will be obviously rejected. We always want maximum portion of heat supplied to the engine to get converted into the work done. Now, in case of variable compression ratio engine, as you increase the compression ratio, it is typically observed more portion of the heat will get converted into work done, and then in that particular case, the heat rejected will obviously drop down, and as the heat rejected drops down, typically the temperature of the combustion chamber will drop down, and then the thermal resistance or the thermal load on the engine also drops down. So that is one more advantage as far as VCR technology is concerned. The next one is the friction losses. Now, as far as friction losses are concerned, let me talk about this first, then I'll come to the fuel reduction potential. As far as friction losses are concerned, VCR engines are more complex in their construction. because you have to change the crankshaft connecting rod. You'll have to do a lot of modification, and once you do that modification, obviously there will be lot of actuations added into the operation of the engine, and in that particular case, the friction losses in case of VCR engines uh, tend to increase. So you will have to be extremely careful while selecting the actuators if you have to reduce the friction losses in case of VCR engines. Otherwise, VCR engines are bound to give you more frictional losses. Then let's talk about the fuel consumption reduction potential. Now, what do you see right over here? This one, the engine which is before modification, and what do you see over here? The engine after modification. Now, look at the gains right over here. Can you see this one? So, this much is basically the gain because of the VCR technology. And if you look at the losses right over here, check this one out. These are the losses before modification, and these are the losses after modification. Now, I hope you remember that I talked about the pumping losses and all, right? So gain right over here increases, and loss right over here also drops down, and because of which, look at this particular final balance. And like I said, the most of the work, sorry, heat supplied will get converted into work done, and that is going to give you a great fuel consumption reduction potential for variable compression ratio engines. The next one is noise emissions and vibrations. In case of VCR engines, or in case of any engine rather, noise is basically because of combustion gradient. And in case of variable compression ratio engine, the combustion gradient is likely to be on a higher side compared to a fixed compression ratio engine. In that particular case, there are chances of increase in noise emissions and vibration as well. Now, in order to prevent that, you got to go for rigid structures for VCR engines. Otherwise, the advantage of VCR technology will not be there. Then the next one is pollution and pollutant emissions. I already had a discussion regarding this one. You will not be using, injection techniques to reduce the tendency of engine knocking. So obviously the pollutants will be significantly on the lower side. Then as far as reliability and durability is concerned, it basically depends upon the way you basically fabricate this particular engine. But there is a question mark, a lot of question marks are there as far as this particular point is concerned. Then as far as use of alternative fuels with VCR engine is concerned, present research, almost all the researchers are typically using VCR engines for testing of alternative fuels. When you test any alternative fuels, you are not having any idea about the engine operating parameters, not engine operating parameters, rather engine output parameters. Like you don't have any idea about brake power, brake specific fuel consumption. What amount of compression ratio is to be kept or something like that, right? So in that particular case, most of the time for testing of alternative fuels, you basically use variable compression ratio engine. Then there is problem in mass manufacturing, obviously. That is the reason basically why still today you won't find VCR engines on running on roads, especially as far as automotive manufacturing is concerned. So this is a new technology. It still needs a lot of research and development. Like I said already, reliability is not yet proven. Unless and until you use it, it is difficult for you to talk about that. Then consumer reactions are still unknown and unpredictable. And obviously, repairs and maintenance will be initially difficult and costly because those garage walas and all will be coming across entirely new technology. So they also need to be trained. Now, let me talk about the work which I have done. Like I said right at the beginning, I proposed one novel variable compression ratio engine on which I basically worked upon. Well, what it basically makes use of? It basically makes use of auxiliary combustion chamber. If you look at this one, So right over here you will find this is the main combustion chamber. Right over here, this one is the main combustion chamber, and right over here you basically have a tube type of a mechanism. We have a tube type of a mechanism. This is the engine which is basically using two spark plugs. One is located, what you see right over here, this one is located inside the auxiliary combustion chamber, and one is located inside the main combustion chamber, which you can't see, but you can see it in this particular photograph. Can you see this one right over here? This is the auxiliary combustion chamber, and this is basically the main combustion chamber. It is basically using two spark plugs. Now, as far as auxiliary combustion chamber are concerned, here you will find there are tube type of a construction, and there are nuts to nuts to fix the compression ratio and change the compression ratio, right? So, by turning this one in anti-clockwise direction, it is possible for you to take this tube out, and once you take this tube out, the clearance volume right over here, this one, will increase, and as the clearance volume increases, the compression ratio is going to drop down. If you turn it in exactly opposite direction, this tube will advance, and then this will decrease the clearance volume, and as the clearance volume decreases, the compression ratio will increase. That is the modification which I carried out on this particular engine, and these are some of the photographs. And after carrying out this particular modification, uh, I took it onto a engine chassis dynamometer. I'll be talking about that little later, but let me introduce you to oxyhydrogen gas first. This one. Now, I know that every one of us knows that there are a lot of restriction put forward by the government as far as tailpipe emissions are concerned. Recently, we are into obviously BS6, which not BS4 rather. We are recently into BS6, where the stringency has significantly increased. And then, as the stringency in the pollution norm increases, the automotive manufacturer comes up with the different technologies. I mean, initially they come up with catalytic converter, then they come up with multi-point fuel injection, then they come up with 32-bit microprocessor. There are too many of them. Simultaneously, you will notice that modification in fuel is also carried out. Now, the octane rating for the fuel has significantly increased. It is almost close to 100 now. We are using LPG, we are using CNG. In the recent news, government has also allowed to add hydrogen into CNG. So a lot of fuel modifications are also going on. Now, why this everything is happening? That is basically because of obviously the hydrocarbon fuels that we are burning. The tailpipe emission from hydrocarbon fuels are deadly dangerous. So those are responsible for global warming, greenhouse effects, acid rains, headache, nausea, and in certain cases even it can lead to death. So there is a concept called a carbon-free fuel, because it is typically observed that conventional fuels are hydrocarbon fuel, and this carbon is basically responsible for majority of the emission. It is responsible for HC, that is unburned hydrocarbon. It is responsible for CO. It is responsible for CO2. I mean, lot of them. So if it is possible for you to remove this carbon element, then it is that type of fuel is typically called as a carbon-free fuel. Obviously, the best carbon-free fuel available with us is obviously hydrogen, but there is problem with the hydrogen, and hence there is a gas which is typically obtained using a water electrolysis process. You basically split the water into oxygen and hydrogen, and this gas is typically called as oxyhydrogen gas. And basically there are two methods with the help of which it is possible for you to produce this particular gas. The first one is water electrolysis. Every one of us knows that. We have already learned about this one in our school days. And then there is one more scientist which they used to call as Stanley Myers, and who put forward the concept of water fuel cell. Well, why I'm talking about oxyhydrogen gas right over here? Because finally I just wanted to integrate it while optimization techniques. So let me show you what is the concept now. So here is that particular experimental setup. What do you see? like I said, the proposed variable compression ratio engine is designed, and it is basically it is basically loaded onto a two-wheeler. I mean, right over here, what you see right over here is basically a Bajaj Pulsar. What you see right over here is basically Bajaj Pulsar. So I went on to modify the Pulsar 150cc engine. Its initial compression ratio was close to 10, but with the help of this modification, it became possible for me to change the compression ratio literally from 6 is to 1 to 11.57 is to 1, and that too with infinite number of variations in between. And then what you see right over here, the oxyhydrogen gas is supplied to the engine combustion chamber immediately after the carburetor right over here. So this is the test specification and test setup which I've used for my work basically. Now let me talk about the important part, how I have gone for the experimentation. So initially I'll be speaking about the design of experiment. I mean, it is expected. I hope you guys know about this one. Now, as far as design of experiment is concerned, the design of experiment consisting of a number of steps basically. This is the pretty old concept which is put forward by Ronald A. Fisher. You must have heard about Taguchi as well. There are a couple of steps that you need to follow as far as design of experiment is concerned. The first one is recognition of problem statement. Then what are the choices of factors and levels? That also depends on you. Then the selection of the response variable, what you wish to check. I mean, what is your response as far as the experimentation is concerned. Then choice of experiment design. Then you'll have to perform the experiment. You have to do the data analysis using some statistical tools, and then you'll have to come up with the conclusion and the recommendation. These are some of the steps in design of experimentation. Now, what I'll be talking about is obviously response surface methodology. This is typically called as RSM. Now, as far as response surface methodology is basically a collection of mathematical and statistical technique. Now, which mathematical technique I'll be using? I'll be using obviously regression analysis as far as mathematical technique is concerned, and as far as statistical technique is concerned, I'll be using ANOVA in this one. I hope you guys are familiar with this particular word. And in response surface methodology, it is typically used to model problems with several independent variables influencing a single or a multiple response. Now, what I'll be doing rather, the engine which I introduced, there it is possible for me to change the compression ratio. Like I said, it is possible for me to change the compression ratio from 6 is to 1 to 11.57 is to 1. And together with that, what I did rather, I have added that oxyhydrogen gas. I have added that oxyhydrogen gas, which is typically called as HHO, to the petrol, and I have obtained a couple of fuel blends. The one which is having 0 HHO, it is called as NB. The one which is having 50 ml of oxyhydrogen gas, that I have called it as B1. Not 50, rather 100 ml. 100 ml per minute of oxyhydrogen gas, that I have called it as B1. The one with 150 ml of oxyhydrogen gas, that I have called it as B2, and the one with 200 ml of oxyhydrogen gas, that I have called it as the B3. So these were the variables. So this is one variable for me, and the fuel blend is the second variable for me. These were the two variables for me. Now, like I said, there were two independent variables, and these variables were reflecting, or these variables were influencing on two responses for me. The first response which I could record is wheel power, which I have called as WP, which is power available at the wheel, and the second one is fuel average performance. So how much kilometers per liter it is giving me, especially in top gear, which that is what I have tested rather. So these two becomes the responses for me, and these becomes obviously independent variables for me. So this is basically a simple problems which I'll be discussing right over here. Now, like I said, what you do basically, the response one you express in as a function of number of independent variable like A, B, C, D. Response two also express in terms of number of similar number of variables A, B, C, and D. And then basically you generate a surface, and that surface is also function of the same factors A, B, C, D, and that surface is typically called as the response surface. What you see right over here, this one, this is typically called as 3D interaction plot. This is typically called as a 3D interaction plot. Can you see over here? Here on this particular side, you'll find there is a compression ratio. On this particular side, there is a fuel blend, and its effect is basically tested on a fuel average performance. So let's quickly go through some of the steps which are typically followed in response surface optimization. So the first one is selection of factors and their levels. Selection of factors and their levels means like just now what I said. The factors for me right over here is obviously the compression ratio and the fuel blends. And compression ratio, now in this particular case, I varied it in three steps. 9.5 is the first one, then 10.5 is the second one, and 11.57 is the third one. So this is the variation in the factors. And as far as fuel blends are concerned, like I said, NB, then there is B1, then there is B2, then there is B4. These were the four levels. So this is typically called as factors and their levels. Then selection of response levels to response variables to be optimized. There are two responses which I try to optimize: fuel of average performance and wheel power. Then you will have to select a typical type of design. What type of design I'll let you know later. Then you will have to select a model. You'll have to obtain the factorial design. You'll have to conduct the experiment. You'll have to do the regression analysis. You'll have to perform ANOVA. You'll have to set the goal for optimization using desirability approach. Now, what is that? I'll let you know later. Then you'll have to obtain the individual desirabilities. I'll be also talking about this one later. Finally, you'll have to obtain the solutions, and you'll have to choose the solution with the highest composite desirability. What is that? I'll talk later. And then finally, you'll have to conduct the confirmation experiment. So these are the steps which are typically followed through. So either you will have a categorical factors, or you will have a numeric factor, or you will have numeric with discrete factor. Numeric means you will have 1, 2, 3, 4, something like that. Then categorical means you will have, you can say it to be a political party number 1, political party number 2, or you can have blood group, like you will have O blood group or AB blood group. Those are called as categorical factors. So depending upon you can have either categorical factor, you can have numeric factor, or you can have numeric with discrete. The design the factors that we have, like I said, we are having we are having compression ratio and fuel blend. So those basically falls into this particular category. Then you'll have to go for design selection. There are number of designs which are available. Here I am trying to show you only two of them. The first one is optimal design, and the second one is historical data. Historical data I'll be talking little later, and even optimal design I'll be talking later. Then you will have to specify the number of factors and their levels. I have already talked about that. Then you'll have to select the type of model. Then you will have to add lack of fit, additional model points, replicate points, and also number of responses. Lack of fit will increase the model fitting. Additional model points will also help you the same. These are some of the factors that you need to take care while building your model. And then you will have to obtain the factorial design. You'll have to conduct the experiment. You'll have to do regression analysis, and you'll have to perform the ANOVA. After performing ANOVA, you'll have to check the adequacy of the model. If the model is not adequate, then once again you'll have to do the regression analysis, and you'll have to come up with a new model. Once again you'll be checking the adequacy. If you find it adequate, then and then only you'll go for the optimization. Now, as far as optimization is concerned, RSM gives you two options: it's graphical or rather numerical. I have gone for the numerical optimization. You'll have to set up the goals, you'll have to obtain the solutions, and you'll have to conduct the confirmation experiment. So let me show you once again. some of the designs, RSM designs. So there are typically three RSM designs are used. The first one is randomized design. The second one is super saturated design, and the third one is split plot design. Randomized design allows experimentation. So it's basically randomized design, and it is typically used when it is possible for you to change the factor level during the experiment, levels of the factor during the experiment. Like I said, during the experiment, if it is possible for you to change the compression ratio, then it is then you can go for randomized design. The second one is super saturated design. This typically uses a quadratic relationship to model the response uh, surface. Now you can have number of relationship. You can have linear relationship. You can have quadratic relationship. You can have a cubic relationship. You have to build your own model, like I said. And then the third one is the split plot design. In this is to be used when one or more factors can be changed during experimentation. So the randomized design where levels of factor you can change, and as far as split plot, this is the factors are to be changed. Then in randomized design, you are having once again five different designs. The first one is CCD, central composite design, where each factor is, you can set it at only five levels. Just now, as I've said, we are using fuel blends, right? When I say blend, then I'm having four levels of it. That is NB, then there is B1, then there is B2, and then there is B3. So in that particular case, it is not possible. I can't use this one because you have to go for at least five levels. Then the next one is box Hecken design. Here in this particular case, each numeric factor is to be set at three levels only. As far as one factor design is concerned, you can only model one factor right over here, and you can have linear model or you can have quadratic model, that too with three and five levels only. So every design is basically having its own advantages and disadvantages. The one which I found more flexible in this one is this one, optimal design, which is giving you flexibility to customize your own model. And if at all you are having your own data, if you have already performed the experiment, then you can even use those experiment using this historical data, and you can model the responses. That too is possible. Moving on, then we'll be talking about the desirability approach for the response optimization. Well, this approach is basically put forward by Deringen and Swiss way back in 1980. Desirability is basically a function which assesses how well the combination of input variables satisfies the goal defined for the selected response. And now this desirability can have a value between 0 to 1. Desirability is typically represented by letter D, and it basically varies between, it's a number basically, and it varies between 0 to 1. If desirability value is 0, then in that particular case, the input variables, whatever the levels that you have set up for the input variables, are not at all defining the goals. See, what I mean to say right over here is, like I said, I am setting up compression ratio some 10.5, and I'm using a fuel blends as B1, and in that particular case, after calculating this value D, if this value comes out to be 0, let us say, in that particular case, D, I'm calculating it for obviously wheel power, let us say, I'm calculating it for wheel power. And if D value comes out to be equal to 0, then in that particular case, these levels are not satisfying the goal. What is the goal for wheel power? I want wheel power to be as high as possible. Now, if desirability is 0, means these two are not going to give me maximum wheel power. I hope I am clear. Now, if I get the desirability as 1 for any combination of the factors, let us say for me compression ratio comes out to be, let us say, 11:5, and fuel blend, let us say, comes out to be equal to B3. And for this configuration, if desirability I get it to be 1 for wheel power, let us say, then in that particular case, this is satisfying the goal defined for the wheel power. Now, it is obviously always better to have desirability equal to 1 all the time. right? So we have to set up the input variables and their levels in such a way that the desirability will be always close to 1. May not be possible all the time. Now, when you calculate desirability for an individual experiment, that is typically called as the individual desirability, and you will be coming across three different goals. You will try to maximize the response, you will try to minimize the response, or you will try to target the response. Now, as far as see, fuel consumption, if fuel consumption is my response, let us say, this is one of the response. So in that particular case, I'll try to minimize this particular response. If wheel power is my response, then I'll obviously try to maximize this response. And let us say I am targeting the fuel economy of, let us say, 70 kilometers per liter. In that particular case, you will be targeting this particular response, right? So there are three goals which are possible, and to get the desirability, Daringen gives us three different expressions. Now you have to be very careful while using this expression. To maximize response, you'll be using this expression. To minimize the response, you'll be using this expression. And to target the response, you'll be using this expression for desirability. Now in this case, what is these terms? Look at this one. The DI is obviously individual desirability. YP stands for the predicted response. Once you are going to model, then after substituting values in the model, it is possible for you to predict the response. That is called as YP. T is obviously the target value that you wish to achieve. L is the lowest possible value that you get, and R stands for the weights that you assign during the experimentation. Now, if your predicted value is less than lowest possible value, then your desirability will be obviously 0. And if your predicted response is greater than the target value, then your desirability value will be equal to 1. And all the time, like I said, this desirability value will be varying between 0 to 1. Similarly, you have to read the same. Right over here, this U stands for the maximum possible value that you get during the experimentation, right? So similarly, you can read this one as well. It's the same, right? Now let me move on. Now, what is composite desirability? Composite desirability defines how well the factor settings satisfy the goal for the multiple responses. Now, in our case, we are having two responses, right? We are having wheel power as one response, and we are having fuel average performance as the second response. So we are having two responses. So if I wanted to go for multi-objective optimization, when I'll be going for multi-objective optimization, in that particular case, instead of using a individual desirability, you will have to calculate the composite desirability. So this is desirability number 1, 2, 3. This is the formula rather, and K is obviously the number of variables responses that you wish to optimize. In this particular case, obviously value of K will be 2. So D1, D2, D3 are the individual desirabilities, and K is the number of responses that you wish to optimize. Desirability, composite desirability value will be also varying from 0 to 1, and the logic behind it is one and the same, similar to individual desirability. Value 0 stands for the selected levels of the factor are not satisfying the goal, and if it is equal to 1 means the selected number of factors are satisfying the objective for that particular goal. They'll have to remember some points in this particular regard. The first one, larger the number of responses to be optimized, lesser will be the composite desirability. Let us say you are going for simultaneously 6 or 7 factors you are trying to optimize. Then in that particular case, you please be sure that your composite desirability is definitely going to come down. Then the second point that you got to remember is the search for the optimal level setting begins from the experimental data itself. You will be performing number of experiments, 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever it may be. Now, when you will be searching for the optimal solution, then your search is going to begin from your experimental data itself, and using that experimental data, by performing number of iterations, you will be obtaining the optimal solution. So do not forget that. Then additional factors, levels which are required will be added at the time of search itself. For each iteration, individual and composite desirability has to be calculated. And finally, the factor levels which are common for multiple responses satisfying their respective goals will be obtained. Now, what is this? I'll tell you. Before that, let's go through the regression analysis. Regression is the process of modeling of the experimental data. We know that this is commonly used in businesses, social sciences, and many other disciplines, including physical and applied sciences. And there are a couple of steps that you need to follow while going for regression analysis. The first one is the selection of predictors. Now, in our case, the practical example which I gave you, the compression ratio and the fuel blends are the predictors for us. Then you will have to determine the functional form of the regression model. Now, as far as the functional form of the regression model is concerned, you can go for different types of regression models. Either it can be linear model, it can be linear plus interaction model, or even it can be quadratic model, it can be cubic model. Now that everything, it depends upon you rather, which model you are going to select, and then you have to come up with the scope of the model, whether the model can predict the results beyond the selected levels of the factor in study or not. Like I said, I have selected range for compression ratio as 9.5:1 to 11.5:1. Whether the model which I have proposed will be giving me results beyond this values or not, means will it be applicable below 9.5 and above 11.5 or not. That too you got to decide. That is typically called as obviously the scope of the model. Then procedure for construction the regression model. Here are some of the steps. I'll quickly go through. Select the model terms with unknown constant and constant associated with each model term. Now look at this one. If you look at this one, now this is the typical regression model in the linear form with a single factor. So this is the response, and here what you see is obviously the predictor or the independent variable. This one is the constant term and this one is the constant associated with the variable term. Similarly, you can have regression model in linear form with multiple factors, like what you see right over here, the B0, B1, X1, B2, X2, B3, X3. You can have, there are number of forms of regression model. If you feel that interaction between the factors can be predominant, like in this particular case, this is factor number 1, this is factor number 2, and here I have added one more term, which is X1 into X2, which means I am suspecting that there is interaction possible between these two, which will be affecting the response variable. So depending upon this, you can choose number of regression models. So typical steps which are used in RSM rather while construction of regression model is you will have to assign codes to each level of the selected factor. Now let me tell you what it is. Like I said, fuel blends, I have used fuel blends as one of the variable, and then it is NB, then B1, then B2, then B3. These are the one which I've used. Now this you got to express in terms of codes. This you will have to express in terms of codes, and the code must vary from -1 to 1, plus -1 to 1. So this distance between -1 to 1, you have to divide into these many parts. So obviously I'll be assigning -1 code to this one. I'll be assigning +1 code to this one, and then code in between I'm going to distribute evenly. Do not forget that. So for each factor you have to assign some code. Then you have to obtain codes for interaction between the selected factor. Now what I mean for that, let us say I'm suspecting interaction between the third level of one factor and the first level of the one factor. So let us say the code assigned to the third level is, let us say, -0.5, and the code assigned to the first level of the first factor is, let us say, -1. And if you suspect interaction between these two, then obviously you'll be generating code with this one. So your code will be obviously 0.5 for this one. So at your interaction codes you will have to obtain by using the codes for the main selected factors. So that's the second step. Then express the experiments in terms of matrix. The matrix will be total three matrix will be there. Coded matrix for factor level. The second one will be coefficient matrix, and the third one will be response matrix. And then you will be performing these matrix operations. You will be performing these matrix operations to get the coefficient matrix. So where AT stands for, this T stands for transpose, this stands for inverse, and this stands for obviously transpose. So these mathematical operation, I hope you know this one. You have to do to obtain the response matrix, and once you do that, you'll be coming up with your final model. Now here are some of the data which I have obtained rather. Check this one out. Now look at this one. Yeah, like I said, I have varied two factors over here, compression ratio and blend. These are the two factors which I have varied, and I have tested its effect on fuel average performance and wheel power. I have conducted total 16 experiments. Check this one out. Total 16. Here are the codes. Can you see this one? See 11.57, that's the highest compression ratio, which is assigned code as 1, and 9.7 is the lowest compression ratio, which is assigned code -1. Check this one out. On this particular side, 0 is the lowest fuel blend, which is no blend for me. No gas is added, so I have given -1 code to that. And 200 ml is the highest gas flow rate, to which I have assigned code 1. So this is how you are supposed to code the factors, and then you will be building your own model, something like this. Can you see this one? This is the model that I have built it, and there are constant obviously in this particular model. This is B0, B1, B2. By performing those matrix operation, I have obtained this constant. Can you see right over here? These are the constant that I have obtained, and then this becomes my model for fuel average performance, and this becomes my model for the wheel power. Right over here, now you will notice that I have simultaneously calculated AR and PR. Now, what is AR? AR is actual response. When I have set up compression ratio as 10.55, and I have used no blend, or rather 100 ml of gas, then I have obtained this particular response. And PR stands for the predicted response. So when I will be using these levels in this particular expression, then this is the answer that I am going to get. So now look, they are very close to each other. So AR stands for actual response, and PR stands for the predicted response, which is obtained from the model. And for every experiment, I have calculated the desirability using this particular formula. Now you can see right over here, right? L means the lowest value. Now can you see this one? This is U right over here. Now what is U? U means the highest possible value which I have obtained during the experiment. Check this one. This is the highest possible value which I have obtained. L is the lowest possible value, which is right over here. Can you see this one? This is the lowest possible value which I have obtained. Now T is the target. My target is same. I wanted to maximize the fuel economy, fuel average performance, so that itself is the target for me. So similarly, on wheel power, you will come across U, L, and T, and using this particular formula, you will have to calculate the individual desirability for each of the experiment. Now let us see how to check the adequacy of the model. Now model adequacy will be checked by performing obviously analysis of variance. Now in my model, basically there were a total 5 terms were there. Compression ratio is the first term, fuel blend is the third term. There was interaction between compression ratio and fuel blend, which I was suspecting. Then this is a square term for both compression ratio and fuel blend. So all in all, total 5 factors were there in my model. Now how to calculate this one? I hope you know little about ANOVA. This SS stands for sum of square, DF stands for degree of freedom, MS stands for mean square. This is F value, and this is obviously the P value. Now as far as sum, then how to calculate residuals, core total. For that I have given the formulas right over here. Core total is yi square minus x square by n. Now, in that particular case, yi square is the square of the individual response. X is obviously the sum of response, which you can see right over here, this one, and n is obviously the total number of experiment that you perform, 16. This is how you will be calculating the core total, and you will be putting it right over here. Then you will have to obtain residual using this particular formula. It is residual error sum of square. So actual response is to be squared, predicted response is to be squared, and then you have to subtract, and you have to go for square of that. With that, you will be obtaining the residual. Then you will have to obtain the model sum of square. To obtain the model sum of square, which is this one, in this particular calculation, it is core total. You have to subtract from the residual to get this particular value. Uh, and then you will have to obtain individual factor sum of square. Now this is going to be a tedious job. From what you got to do, you got to remove each factor. Let us say you want to determine the sum of square for compression ratio. Then what you got to do, from the model term, you got to remove the compression ratio, and you got to formulate the new regression model by performing those same mathematical operation. And once you get that regression model, you got to find out the error sum of square, or the residual, which is this one. And that residual you have to subtract from this residual, which is this one rather. And then you will be obtaining that particular sum of square. So ultimately what you have to do, individual factor has to be subtracted to get the sum of square. Now let me talk about degree of freedom. The total degree of freedom will be equal to number of experiments, or number of run minus 1. We have total 16 experiments, so I have subtracted 1 from that. So you will get 15. Then obviously in residual degree of freedom, I'll be calculating. Individual factor will be assigned with 1 degree of freedom. So all in all, here you will find 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then there will be 9 degree of freedom for this one. So 9 minus 6 will give 15 minus 9 will give me obviously 6 right over here. Once I divide sum of square by degree of freedom, it will give me mean square, and using F distribution table, you will be obtaining the F value and obviously the P value. Now the confidence level that I have selected right over here is 95%. So the values right over here, if the values are less than 0.05 right over here in this particular table, then all those factors will be obviously significant. Now check this one. This one is significant. This one is significant. This one is significant. This one is almost all the factors right over here are significant. This is how you got to formulate the ANOVA model. Now, as far as checking the model adequacy is concerned, whether this model is adequate or not, how to decide that? That will be decided by these 3 constants. That is R square, predicted R square, and adjusted R square. As far as R square is concerned, well, R square is basically a statistical term. R square is a statistical term which is measure of how close the data is fitted to the regression model, and it is usually used to compare 2 models. The one with the higher R square value is to be preferred always, obviously. Now it is always advisable not to simply rely on R square value. It is always better to rely on adjustable R square than R square. The reason for that is R square value tend to increase if you simply add some factors into your model, which is so it's not a good predictor. Instead of that, adjusted R square value will only increase if the added term in the model will increase the goodness of fit. So if that model term which you are going to add is going to fit the data more properly, then and then only adjusted R square will increase. And predicted R square, this predicted R square is the one which will give you an idea about the predictability of the model. This adjusted R square and predicted R square must be in close agreement with each other. So let me move on. So this is how you got to obtain these coefficients rather. I just forgot to talk about these expressions. R square is 1 minus residual upon core total. So this is that particular residual. This is core total. Predicted R square is 1 minus press upon residual plus model SS. Residual is this one once again, same what I've talked about. SS model is this one, 2564 in this particular calculation, obviously. And adjusted R square, what you see right over here, is residual upon residual degree of freedom upon residual plus model SS model upon residual degree of freedom plus model degree of freedom, and everything is given in this particular table itself. So I won't be talking much about that, but you have to calculate this particular constants, and I suggest you to rely more on adjusted and predicted R square for better results. Now there are number of softwares which are available in the market, out of which this is one which I have used rather, because the process which I explain is tedious process. You can't do it by your own. However, I have to do it. I mean, when you are doing research, you have to do it. So I did that, but there are number of software packages which are also available, and those are going to help you out. Now, what you see right over here, why I wanted to talk about. Now, look at this one. If I think of individual desirability for fuel average performance, then this individual desirability is obtained for seventh number of run. And as far as highest possible individual desirability of 1 is concerned, for wheel power, it is obtained at 10th experiment. Right? I think I'm right. Yes, it's at 10. Now look at the levels. This is 11.57. This is 11.57. Now, if you look at this one, this is 200 and this is 100. Means for maximum possible wheel power, you have to set up compression ratio 11.57. But fuel blend is to be kept at 100 ml per minute. And for maximum fuel average performance, well, compression ratio is to be set up at 11.57, and fuel blend is to be set up at 200 ml per minute. Means different factor levels are expected for two different responses. Now here the optimization process comes, and then these software packages are obviously going to help you out. Now what these software packages do, I mean, they'll be adding number of experiments in between. They'll be adding number of experiments in between which you probably have not performed, and every time this individual desirability together with composite desirability will be calculated. So like I said, individual desirability for this experiment will be compromised, so it will be dropped down, and even individual desirability for this experiment will be compromised, and then finally you'll be coming up with certain solution best possible, where fuel average performance will be best and even wheel power will be best. Now let me talk about the 3D interaction plot right over here. Now 3D interaction plot will give you an idea about variation in your response when you are going to change the input variables. Like if I'll be changing the compression ratio by keeping factor level of blend constant, then it is likely to give me trend something like this. Similarly, if I'll be keeping the compression ratio constant and if I'll be simply increasing the fuel blend, then it is going to give me rise in fuel average performance, something like this. Now, depending upon your responses, you can predict. Like I said, I want to have maximum value of fuel average performance. So, well, you will find it is at this particular level, somewhere close to this one, you'll be getting highest possible fuel average performance. If you further increase, I mean, if you are setting up blend at highest possible level, and if you're choosing highest compression ratio, so on that particular case, you will notice the fuel average performance is progressively dropping down. So once again, the Design Expert software package or the software package, which you can use, will help you to create this 3D interaction plots as well. And then finally, response optimizer plot. Response optimizer plots are the plots which are typically plotted to understand effect of individual factor. To understand the effect of individual factor by keeping other factor at its constant level. Now check this one out. Now if I'll be fixing the compression ratio at 11.15:1, and if I simply change the blend, then what will be the effect on fuel average performance? What will be the effect on wheel power? Check this one out. Well, if I do that, then the fuel average performance will progressively increase. But in case of wheel power, well, it will increase to certain level, but beyond that, it is going to drop down. So these response optimizer plot are helpful or useful in giving us an idea about the variation in the response by keeping one factor at a constant level and varying the other factor. So this is once again, you can plot it using Excel or you can use any software package, no problem with that. Finally, you have to confirm the experiment, and to confirm the experiment, you will have to perform the confirmation experiment. These are a couple of steps that you got to follow the confirmation experiment. This is the experiment. This is the expression which gives you the confidence interval. What is that? I'll let you know later. In this expression, y0 rather bar is the predicted mean response at the optimum level of the factors in the coded form. This value you have to obtain using a T distribution table for alpha, which is confidence level, which is typically taken as 95%, and half of that, and for residual degree of freedom. SE mean is this particular term. Once again, you'll have to do some mathematical operations to get this particular value. Which are those mathematical operations are mentioned right over here. In this one, once again, same. XT is the transpose of a matrix. This one is the inverse of a matrix. I hope you are used to this particular terms. And you have to get this confidence interval. And once you get that confidence interval, you have to express your data in this particular form. Now check this one out. For fuel average performance, the predicted mean comes out to be equal to 69.39. The model which I proposed is giving me this particular value. So using this residual degree of freedom, I've got these T values from the T distribution table. I have obtained this SE mean, and from SE mean I have obtained the confidence interval. Now this confidence interval is to be added and subtracted from the predicted mean to get this lowest value and the highest value, something right over here and right over here. And then at the given values of the optimum level, you have to perform the experiment. Now these are the readings that I am getting rather in this particular experiment, and these are in very close agreement with the predicted mean. And look at the error. The error value is coming less. So this is how you have to perform confirmation experiment, and then only it is possible for you to confirm your experiment. Finally, that's it from my side. I have tried to elaborate the things in a lucid manner rather, to the best of my knowledge. I have tried to do that. So let me escape, and once again let me stop presenting. So I hope you guys have got a little bit idea about what I have done about VCR engines and everything. Over to you, Kuldeep sir. Now I would be happy if at all there are some questions from the audience to answer.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Any query from participants?
Well, this topic is little bit difficult to understand because it takes a lot of mathematics into consideration. Well, I try to put it in just 2 hours form because I have to give some time to VCR and explaining that, and then how the optimization is been done using variable compression ratio engine. So I understand that it's a little bit difficult to understand, difficult to digest, but somehow you have to do it. But and my suggestion is, unless and until you do it by yourself, it will not be possible for you to understand it thoroughly. Rather, so if at all using any software package, it's fine you are using it, but at the background you should have thorough knowledge about how that software package is working. That is most important one, rather. And probably I would suggest Excel is the best one. Excel is the best one if at all you're doing any kind of calculations, matrix operation, I mean plotting 3D interaction plot, or optimizer plot. It is possible using Excel. So Excel is the best option available if you are in hurry, or if you want to predict it little bit quick or fast, then you can obviously go for any kind of a software package. Over to you, Kuldeep sir.
Actually, sir, optimization technique, optimization graduation, I studied many things, many processes, many techniques coming under the optimization subject.
Exactly.
So I know ANOVA process and some many other techniques for the optimizing the things.
True,
But
true, very true.
but eventually it's a wide subject, and
Exactly,
we need to choose our best suited process for our component.
exactly.
Okay,
Perfect, perfect.
for our process or for our any of the system, it should relate to our system, so that according to based on the availability of our system, input parameters available with us.
Exactly, exactly.
Any question from participants? If there is no question, then I'll conclude the session. Sir, actually, you you have taught us many new things. Even I came to know many new things from your presentations. Okay,
Thank you.
though I am from automobile background, but still teacher is a learner.
Obviously.
Okay, so I came to know many points from your presentation as far as the fact knock rate, frictional losses, and noise emissions and vibration. These points really, even I wanted to know much more about this topic, because
Okay,
because I am working on the same field to
great.
reduce the emission, and to reduce the byproduct of the combustion as far as the bad effects is concerned.
Okay,
Okay, that is really, it will be helpful to me if anything I will be getting as a difficulty for these points.
definitely,
I definitely contact to you, so that
definitely, sir. Definitely.
some those points. And another thing, your research work you have carried during your PhD course. So
Yes, sir.
that really enriched us from
Thank you.
the, I mean, points where if someone really wish to carry their research work on particular topic or on particular point, they can find out even from your presentation. Okay.
Yes,
So
thank you. Thank
anything is left untouched, someone may get someone research work. Okay, so there are many scopes for the IC engine, IC engine optimization, IC
Correct.
engine techniques, and even IC engine upgradation. Okay, we are talking about electrification, electric technologies on the upcoming or the upcoming days, but still there are chances. I mean, I would say even up to the 30, 40 years, still there is a scope of availability of fossil fuels. So nobody would probably think for purely on the electric vehicles, or there is a difference in the choices. Okay, if someone there, there many scopes are available. Okay. This is from my side, and on behalf of Automobile Engineering Department, ADIT, I offer my sincere gratitude to Dr. Milind S. Yadav sir, who has contributed his valuable time for,
Thank you.
for almost 2 hours to making us enlighten about the various various research available, and
Thank you, sir.
research carried by him as well.
Thank you.
So once again, thank you very much, sir, from
Thank you.
Indian
Before
Institute of Technology. Yes, sir. Yeah, yes.
before closing down, I would like to thank Kuldeep sir. He was in constant touch with me, and he was guiding me actually how to go through this particular process. So, sir, thank you very much. In future, if at all you are in need of any help, I'll be happy to help you out. No doubt about that. And one more thing, I am really thankful to Dr. Patel. He was actually a friend of mine, and because of him actually I could deliver this particular session. So I'm thank you to all the organizers of this particular STP for giving me this particular opportunity. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Thank you. Is there anything from participant to tell to the speaker, to the expert? Okay, sir. We conclude the session. We
Yes, sir.
end this session. Thank you
Yes,
very
sir.
much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Thank you.